It is Tuesday, January 20th, 2026. Okay, so picture this. I want to set up two scenes for you, and they're separated by about 1,000 years. Scene one, we're in this dusty little town, Bethlehem. You've got an old prophet, and he is just absolutely terrified. He's sneaking into town to commit what is basically high treason against a really violent king.
It starts like a political thriller right out of gate.
Exactly. Then scene two, flash forward 1,000 years. We're in a grain field. A group of guys are just walking through. They're hungry, so they grab a handful of grain to snack on.
Okay.
And suddenly they're surrounded. Religious lawyers are accusing them of a capital offense.
So two very different genres there. One is this high-stakes monarchy succession. The other feels like a minor dispute over lunch.
But they are the exact same story. Today we're doing a deep dive into Lectionary 3:12, and we're pairing it with a devotional reflection on sacred rest.
The sources are 1 Samuel 16, Psalm 89, a bit from Ephesians, and Mark chapter 2. And the thread, the thing that ties all of this together is really vision. It's about this massive disconnect between how human beings see things, using external rules, appearances.
Surface level stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Versus how God sees things, which is, it's all internal. It's the difference between looking at the appearance and looking at the heart.
And we're not talking in like a cheesy beauties on the inside kind of way. This is about national security and religious law.
No, this isn't a Hallmark card. This is a collision of two completely different value systems.
So let's jump in. 1 Samuel 16. The context here is, it's heavy.
Yeah.
The king, Saul, has completely gone off the rails. He's paranoid, he's disobedient, unstable.
Yeah.
And God says to the prophet Samuel, hey, stop grieving for Saul. I've rejected him. You need to go to Bethlehem, the house of a guy named Jesse, and anoint one of his sons as the new king.
And Samuel's reaction here is so interesting because it's not, yes, sir. It's just pure fear. He basically says to God, how can I possibly go? If Saul hears about this, he'll kill me.
Which, that feels like a pretty reasonable response.
Totally.
Saul is this desperate man clinging to power. If the top religious figure in the country goes to another town to crown his replacement, that's a coup. Samuel is risking his life.
He's risking immediate execution.
But here's where the text gets a little tricky, and I want to get your take. God gives Samuel a plan. He says, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord.
The cover story.
Yeah. And I'm reading this thinking, is God telling his prophet to lie? The sacrifice is clearly just a front for the anointing.
It's a question theologians have, wrestled with. It's not technically a lie. He did actually go to sacrifice. That was part of the ritual. But it was definitely a concealment of his main purpose.
It feels a lot like spycraft.
It is. It suggests that, while truth is the ultimate goal, total transparency isn't always required, especially when you're dealing with a murderous tyrant like Saul. It shows that doing God's will sometimes requires a bit of shrewdness.
So Samuel gets to Bethlehem, and the town elders are literally shaking. The text says they came trembling.
Well, think about it. If the guy who speaks for God shows up in your tiny village unannounced, your first thought is, what did we do wrong? You assume judgment is coming.
Right. They ask him, do you come in peace? He says yes, sets up the sacrifice, and invites Jesse and his sons. And this leads to the main event, the parade of sons. Jesse brings out the first one, Eliab, the firstborn. And Samuel's reaction is just immediate. He sees him and thinks, surely the Lord's anointed is here.
And why does he think that?
Well, the text says he has a lofty stature.
He's impressive.
Right. And you have to remember Samuel's history. He was the one who anointed Saul. And what was Saul's main qualification?
He was a head taller than everyone else.
Exactly. Samuel's been conditioned to think a king looks like a warrior, tall, strong, intimidating. He sees Eliab and his brain goes, okay, this fits the mold. This is Saul 2.0, just hopefully without the crazy.
Just pattern recognition. He's looking for a type. And that is the exact moment God stops him cold. This is the pivotal verse for our whole deep dive today. Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him.
For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart.
It just completely dismantles Samuel's entire framework. God is basically saying that thing you think makes him a king, his height, his look, that is the very thing that is irrelevant to me.
So Eliab's out. Then comes Abinadab.
Rejected.
Shammah.
Also rejected. 7 sons, one by one, they all pass by. Can you just imagine the awkward silence in that room?
Oh, it must have been suffocating. Samuel standing there with this horn full of anointing oil. And God just keeps saying, no, no, not him.
The whole process has failed. Samuel finally has to turn to Jesse and ask, are these all the sons you have?
And Jesse says, well, there's the youngest, but he's out keeping the sheep.
And you can just hear the dismissal in his voice. In that culture, the youngest was the servant. David wasn't just out at work. He was considered so insignificant he wasn't even worth inviting to a sacred feast with a prophet. He was literally and metaphorically out in the field.
So they send for him. And here's where the text throws this curveball that I always find a little confusing. We just got this big speech about not judging by appearances.
Right.
But then the writer describes David. He was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome.
It does sound like a contradiction, doesn't it?
Yeah. If looks don't matter, why tell us he's good looking?
I don't think the text is saying looks are the reason he was chosen. The Hebrew for ruddy often implies this, like redness, vitality. He's not the tall, polished statue like Eliab. He's alive.
Okay.
But the point is, God didn't choose him because he was handsome. God chose him, and he happened to be handsome. The choice was already made out in the sheep pasture based on his heart long before he ever walked into that room.
The oil flows, the Spirit rushes onto David, and the shepherd boy becomes the king in waiting.
Okay, before we jump to the New Testament, we have to bridge this. We have Psalm 89 in our sources.
Right. Psalm 89 is like a poetic commentary on this exact moment. It uses the phrase, I have found David, my servant.
Found implies a search.
It does. While Samuel was looking at Eliab's height, God was searching for a heart. And the psalm gives us a peek into what that heart was like. It says David calls God, you are my father, my rock.
Rock really stands out, especially when you think about how unstable Saul was.
That's the contrast right there. Saul was shifting sand. God found someone who was grounded, someone built on a rock. That's the internal reality that beats the external appearance every time.
And then we have that little snippet from Ephesians, having the eyes of your hearts enlightened.
And I think we should use that as our lens for the rest of this conversation. Samuel needed heart eyes to see the real king. And we need heart eyes to understand what's about to happen in Mark chapter 2. Because if you just look at this next story with your physical eyes, you miss the entire point.
You miss everything.
All right, glasses on, let's go. Scene 2. Jesus and his disciples, they're walking through the green fields on the Sabbath.
And just like Samuel was being watched, Jesus is being watched by the Pharisees.
His disciples are hungry, so they pluck some heads of grain, they rub them in their hands to get the husks off, and they eat them. To me, this is just, it's snacking. It's like eating trail mix on a hike.
Right.
But the Pharisees see this and they lose it. Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath? And, we always paint the Pharisees as these villains who just hate joy. But they're not just trying to be difficult here, are they?
No, and it's really important to understand their perspective. The Pharisees loved God's law. They believed Israel's exile happened because they failed to keep the Sabbath. So to stop that from ever happening again, they built what they called a fence around the Torah. Extra rules, hundreds of them, to keep you from even getting close to breaking one of the main laws. So the Bible says, do no work, but what does work mean? The rabbis defined 39 categories of forbidden work.
Yep.
One of those categories was reaping, another was threshing.
I see where this is going.
So when a disciple plucks a head of grain from the stalk, well, technically that's reaping.
And when he rubs it in his hands.
That's threshing. To a Pharisee looking with their external legal eyes, those men aren't snacking, they're farming. They are committing industrial work on the holiest day of the week.
So in their worldview, this is a huge deal.
It's a capital offense in their theology, seriously.
And Jesus' defense is it's brilliant.
Yeah.
He doesn't argue about the definitions of reaping or threshing. He doesn't say, oh, come on, guys, it's just a handful. He goes straight to legal precedent, and he brings up David.
The very person we were just talking about, he asked them, have you never read what David did?
Which has to be the most epic burn you can deliver to a group of Bible scholars. Have you guys not read the book?
He brings up the time when David was on the run from Saul again, tying back to that same era. David and his men show up at the tabernacle and they're starving. And there's no food available except for the bread of the presence.
Okay, we need to pause there. What exactly is the bread of the presence?
It was 12 loaves of bread, representing the 12 tribes of Israel. They were placed on a golden table inside the holy place. Levitical law was crystal clear. Only the priests could eat this bread. It was holy. It belonged to God.
So David, the man after God's own heart, walks into the sanctuary and eats the holy offerings.
Yes, he takes what belongs exclusively to God and gives it to his hungry soldiers.
So why wasn't he struck down? Why is Jesus using this as a defense? It sounds more like an admission of guilt, like, yeah, David broke the law, so we can too.
Because he's teaching them about a hierarchy of holiness. Jesus is making an argument from the lesser to the greater. Yes, the bread was holy, but David's life and the lives of his men were holier.
Preserving human life is more important than the ritual.
Exactly. David understood that the heart of God's law is mercy and life. If he had let his men starve to death while staring at holy bread, he would have been honoring the external rule while violating the internal heart of God.
It's the same pattern. Man looks at the appearance, the reaping motion, the bread rules. But God looks at the heart, the hunger, the need for mercy.
And Jesus is looking at the Pharisees and saying, "You are so obsessed with the external ritual, the chaff and the grain, that you are completely ignoring the hunger of my disciples." And then he drops the hammer. He says, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath."
That's the line. That's the one that flips the whole script.
It does. The Pharisees acted like human beings were created for the sole purpose of serving the Sabbath. And Jesus says, no, you've got it completely backward. The Sabbath is a gift. It was designed for you, to heal you, to restore you.
And this connects perfectly to that devotional we read on sacred rest. There was that quote from Psalm 127. He grants sleep to those whom he loves.
That's the core of it. Rest is an act of trust. It's a gift of love. When the Pharisees turned the Sabbath into this minefield of 39 forbidden activities, they turned a gift into a terrible burden. They made it a source of constant anxiety.
It's the exact opposite of rest.
Yeah.
It's hypervigilance.
Precisely. And that's why Jesus ends with this incredible claim, "The Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath."
Which sounds like a massive power play. Like, I'm in charge here, I make the rules.
It is a claim of authority, for sure. He's claiming to be the author of the Sabbath, but think about what that means. If he's the Lord of the Sabbath, he's the one who gets to define what rest actually is. And he is defining it as mercy, as feeding the hungry, as restoration.
So if we pull back and look at the whole picture today, we have Samuel looking for a tall warrior, but finding a shepherd with a true heart. We have the Pharisees looking for rule breakers, but Jesus points them to human need.
And the consistent message, again and again, is that God is not impressed by our external fences or our lofty stature. He's looking at the internal reality. Is there faith? Is there mercy?
It feels freeing, to be honest. It's like no more performance anxiety.
It is freeing, but it's also, I think, more demanding.
How is it more demanding?
Because external rules are easy.
Oh, right. It's much easier to check a box that says, I didn't pick grain today, than it is to actually examine your own heart.
Exactly. Did I break a rule is a simple yes or no question. Am I becoming a person of mercy? That's a much harder question to answer. It requires vulnerability. It requires those eyes of the heart that Ephesians talks about.
It really strikes me that we still do this. I mean, we might not be counting our steps on a Saturday, but we have our own versions of this external versus internal conflict.
Oh, we absolutely do. And it brings me to this thought I've been mulling over, especially in our modern world. We talk so much about self-care and burnout.
In a massive industry.
It is. And in a strange way, I wonder if we've turned rest into a new set of pharisaical rules. You know, I have to meditate for 20 minutes. I have to do my 10-step skincare routine. I have to disconnect from all my screens by 8 p.m. And if I don't do it perfectly, I feel guilty. I feel like I've failed at wellness.
We've taken the Sabbath that was made for us
and
turned it into another stressful job that we have to perform.
We're right back in the grain field, stressing about the rules of rest instead of actually resting. So the provocative thought I'd want to leave you with is about authority.
Go on.
Jesus claimed to be Lord of the Sabbath. That means he is the Lord of our rest. So the question for us is, are you actually submitting your rest to him? Is your rest an act of trust in God like David in the cave or the disciples in the field? Or is your rest just another system you're using to maintain control, to check boxes, to optimize your own performance?
Oof, that stings a little. Are we resting to trust God, or are we just resting to make ourselves more productive?
Because if you're just resting to optimize yourself, you're looking at the outward appearance again. You're looking for Eliab. But true rest, sacred rest, that only comes from a heart that trusts the Lord of the Sabbath.
That is more than enough to think about for a Tuesday. Thanks for this deep dive.
Check your heart eyes.
We'll see you next time.